We'll just give just a minute more, just until we get to let a few more people in. Okay, I think we'll get underway now. I think everybody's had a chance and we've got most of our participants online. So just welcome to everyone to the AFL Barwon Game Plan Education Week, proudly presented by AFL Barwon and Leisure Networks and supported by Epworth Hospital, Corio Bay Health Group, Victor Sports and Xena Sport. There's nothing more important than your health. When a diagnosis and treatment is delayed, it can have a serious impact. Don't wait to seek treatment. If you're unwell, Epworth is ready to care for you and your loved ones. Ask your GP for a referral to an Epworth accredited specialist in Geelong or Melbourne, epworth.org.au. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the land on which I am presenting from today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you're all listening to from today. I wish to pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. The chat function will be available throughout if you've got questions, so please place them in this function. Questions will be answered either throughout the presentation if deemed appropriate or at the conclusion. Tonight's session on infrastructure is presented by Leisure Networks with some great information to understand better practices in upgrading facilities at your venue. Tonight, your presenters and guest speakers are Michael King and, sorry, I'll just go through the presenters there. Michael's a manager of business development at Leisure Networks and is a key driver behind their fee for service, consulting and new business initiatives across the Barwon region and metropolitan Melbourne. Michael's also assistant coach at the Geelong Falcons, had success with coaching at St Joseph's and led junior player and coach strategies on and off field at clubs in Geelong and Melbourne. Jessie Drever is one of our other presenters. Jessie is the Coordinator Community Development at Leisure Networks and works across Greater Geelong and Melbourne to develop and deliver existing and new programs for clubs, associations and government. Jessie's also worked in various roles for the Geelong Falcons for the past 10 years and is currently operations assistant for the club. He manages the under-17s program and was appointed assistant manager of the Vic Country under-16s in 2020. We also have Brodie Marston. Brodie is the Recreation Development Officer at the Golden Plains Shire Council and leads, advises and supports council delegated committees of management responsible for managing key community recreational facilities. Brodie also identifies and promotes innovative approaches to facility management and opportunity and has significant experience in applying for grant funding to support capital projects, which is a huge asset for all our clubs. Sarah Naylor. Sarah is the chairperson and GM of football at the Geelong West Giants and oversaw the $11 million development by the planning group of West Oval. Previously, Sarah was with Geelong West Sporting Club Cheetahs, who merged with Geelong West St Peters in 2016-17. Whilst at the Giants, Sarah has also been a senior netball player, legendary senior women's football player, senior football trainer and trainer coordinator. Please welcome our presenters and guest speaker for this evening. And I'll hand over to them to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I'm just going to share my screen for everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessie from Leisure Networks, as Michael said, and I'm joined by my colleague tonight, Michael King. I wish to also begin by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting from today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you're all listening in from. I wish to pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Just for those who aren't aware, Leisure Networks, we're a regional sports assembly operating in the Barwon region, and we provide volunteer support, information, training and development opportunities to local clubs. We also support work by the community sport and recreation sector to create inclusive opportunities for people with a disability as a registered NDIS provider. As Michael said, we've got two guest speakers joining us tonight, being Brodie Marston from Golden Plains and Sarah Naylor from Geelong West Giants. Brodie's going to give us an insight into infrastructure planning considerations from a council perspective, and Sarah's going to give a case study of the recent build at West Oval. Just as a bit of an introduction for tonight's session, we'd ask if you could please put in the chat the reason you are joining us for tonight's session. So whether that you might have a new build in mind, or you might simply just be looking to better educate yourself on this area of infrastructure and facility planning for your club. So whilst we go through tonight's session, if you're comfortable enough to put your details in the chat, that'd be great, just so when we do get to particular discussion points, we can target it. To give a bit of an overview of tonight's session, we're going to be working through, firstly, the key stakeholders involved in infrastructure and facility planning. Secondly, what you have to consider when planning new facilities or an infrastructure upgrade. Thirdly, inclusivity in planning. Fourth, sources of funding that are available to support a build. How to best activate underutilized facilities. And lastly, going through a case study, obviously being West Oval, on the journey through a facility upgrade. So firstly, when clubs think about their facilities, sometimes you can probably get caught a little bit thinking about their use from the club's perspective only. So from both a management and a planning side of things, it's always really useful to consider all the various stakeholders that are involved in your facility. So firstly, as said, the club itself is obviously a key stakeholder. Your club might be the primary tenant. It might own the facility itself, or it might be one of a number of tenants of the facility. You might have different access and management arrangements for your facility compared to other clubs, and there might be different options available to it in terms of potential upgrades based on this arrangement. One of the major ones you'll obviously be dealing with at the moment is your interaction between a cricket club and the football and netball side of things, and how you interact and how you use a facility year round. Secondly, there are other potential users of your club's facility, including recreation groups and social groups. You might have control over who uses your facilities outside of club's usage times, or council might dictate these arrangements for you. If you do have some control over the use, this can obviously be a really important revenue stream for the club if you can give access to other groups to use your facility during times when the club itself isn't using them. Your association or local governing body, being AFL Barwon, can obviously have a key role in infrastructure management and development. So this can be from a variety of perspectives, including advocacy and securing usage rights of particular facilities for special events such as finals. Fourth, your state and national governing body, being AFL Victoria and the AFL, can also be important in advocacy for facilities and providing support to securing funding for upgrades. They can also help in arguing for particular need and lobbying for government support. Local government are one of the major stakeholders in terms of your facilities from both a usage and management perspective, as I've touched on a bit earlier, but also for funding of upgrades, which we're going to touch on shortly. For some facilities, you'll obviously be dictated as to what times and access rights you have, whereas others you might have a bit more control over it. Regardless, it's obviously really important to have a strong relationship with council for the future of your club's facility, which Brodie's going to talk through shortly. State government are generally less involved in the management side of things from your facility, but as we're going to go through shortly, they're usually the primary funder of upgrades and developments. And this is similarly the case with federal government as well, who are generally going to be involved with the larger builds. Another thing we're going to touch on shortly, but another key stakeholder obviously for builds is the developers themselves. And Sarah touches on shortly how she's worked with the developers. And there are developers that are consistent across some of the upgrades we've seen in this region. if your club is considering an infrastructure build or redevelopment, it's usually going to need to secure significant funding support to assist it to complete the project. So on this slide, we've just got a bit of an overview of the sources of funding that are available to clubs. So as touched on previously, that the primary source of funding is going to be through state government grants. Our second session tonight actually helps clubs write a successful grant. So if you haven't registered for that already, you can leave your details in the chat function and we can give you the details for the second session tonight. Basically, the state government funding is going to be really important for securing larger funding for builds. Given the circumstances of the last year, we've noticed an increased willingness for government to support clubs, and there is a regular grant program for large-scale infrastructure builds. The government can also assist through developments that are negotiated and lobbied over a substantial period of time, which West Oval is a good example of that, if the need can be properly identified and advocated. AFL Barwon and the AFL or AFL Victoria may from time to time look to provide funding for smaller upgrades through to larger scale pieces. So this might include lighting upgrades, inclusive facilities or playing surface improvements. Local government also provide funding for facility developments and upgrades through both periodic grants, which you see from time to time throughout the year, and also, as I said, support of larger pieces of work. So as I said, Sarah's going to give a great case study of this at the end of the presentation in terms of the journey Geelong West went through and the support that they received from the City of Greater Geelong. And Brodie shortly is going to talk through some considerations from a council perspective on facility upgrades. As you would have seen over the time with GMHBA Stadium, the federal government occasionally provide funding for large scale builds in the region. This isn't particularly relevant for local clubs, but it is important in understanding the context of the various funders for facility upgrades. Similarly, there are certain grants that are provided by foundations and other philanthropic bodies to support infrastructure development. So these types of grants are predominantly in support of different programs and services, but from time to time can be used to gain additional funding for your builds, especially if it is to address a particular need, such as being more inclusive. Lastly, your club may dedicate reserves towards developments itself. So this will obviously often depend on the circumstances of your club, and especially coming off the last year, it is having those reserves are probably going to be a bit difficult at the time, but it is always advantageous in terms of securing further funding if you can demonstrate that your club is committed to the project through allocating its own funds towards the build. You'll see on the screen that we have noted that it is important to think about diversifying your funding sources, so it isn't as heavily reliant on one funder. Not only is this going to increase your chances of being successful, but because you aren't so dependent on the outcome of one particular grant application, and you can show that there is a commitment and a particular need for your project by advocating and gaining support from various parties and funders. So if you have a build that has funding from the club, local government and state government, as I said, this shows a willingness from the club to invest its own funds. There's a recognition from local government of the benefits from the build or upgrade, and state government can provide the additional funds needed to get you over the top. Touching on this a bit further and to talk a bit further about considerations from a council perspective in terms of a facilities upgrade and general requirements when seeking further funding support, we'd like to introduce Brodie from Golden Plains Shire. Over to you, Brodie. Might be on mute, Brodie.
Got me now?
Got you now. Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I trust you're all well. Hopefully tonight's presentation might help you advance the project you have in mind. And I just want to note that whilst each local government area is unique, our approaches and considerations are usually very similar. So hopefully the things I discussed tonight are transferable to your own government areas if you're outside of Golden Plains. In my role as Recreation Development Officer, I'm responsible for helping identify required projects, building the strategic justification for them and sourcing the funding required to deliver them. I work really closely with the community groups, in particular local sporting clubs, to increase participation and create positive sporting environments. And obviously providing quality facilities supports this. We all know that funding isn't easily available though, so it's critical both council and community groups work collaboratively to develop project plans and ensure they align and meet the needs of the community and a whole lot of other key stakeholders as well. This is the most critical starting point and often one of the most overlooked stages of planning, particularly in my experience. Generally, there's two ways councils receive project ideas. They either come through a consultation process, which might occur during the development of a new strategy or a site master plan, or they come directly through community proposals from sporting clubs like yourself. In addition to this, and on occasion, we may receive a request or a proposal from a local councillor or a state or federal member advocating on behalf of their constituents or their local clubs. But importantly, when assessing or being asked to support a project, my role is to ensure that they are all well planned, well thought out, that they can be delivered safely, to budget, and within the proposed or required timelines. So what do I or others within council and in similar roles to myself look for and want to see when we receive a project proposal? Well, we generally want to know the following, which should form part of your project plan. Firstly, what is it that you actually want? We want you to be really clear and specific. So for example, we require $5,000 to engage the services of a suitably qualified and skilled sports court expert to pressure wash, reline mark and install new scorers benches on 3 courts at the Victoria Park Recreation Reserve in Bannockburn. Or it might be something along the lines of following an extensive consultation process and the development of designs for the installation of new coaches and plays boxes at the Inverleigh Sporting Complex. We're seeking council support to apply for state government funding to help deliver this project. Following this stage, funding bodies or project assessors will want to know how this project was identified. So how's your idea come about? What or who are the local drivers? And has a need been identified? So as an example, if you're wanting to install shower cubicles to replace the existing open shower, you might respond with something like, this project was identified as a priority as it will support our club to increase participation in football. A number of junior and female team representatives have suggested the current shower facilities are inappropriate and it's impacting their experience at the club. To ensure we continue to build a club of choice and provide contemporary facilities that are safe and make participants feel comfortable and supported, it's critical we address these issues. You might follow on with something like our sporting governing body and other user clubs are supportive of this project as it aligns with their own goals, and the issue has been identified in a recent facility audit where the current showers were deemed unfit for use. So as Jesse spoke about previously, making sure that you speak to local partners, other user clubs, and community members who may access your facilities is critical in demonstrating need and obtaining support. The next planning consideration and step should be strategic justification for the project. And as I said, this is a really critical element, especially when you're looking for government support at any level. So here, council and other funding bodies are looking to see if an applicant has spoken with and sought support from other key stakeholders. So in your case, does the cricket club support the project? Will it positively impact them and their members? And if so, how? We're also wanting to know that population demographics demonstrate current and future need in your area. If you're in a growth corridor, what is the expected population in the coming years? If you're a league or governing body suggesting there's an increasing amount of women and girls looking to play footy in your area, then let us know that as well. Seek letters of support from them and from anybody else who you think can add value to your application. Ask them to provide some stats or evidence to back up their suggestion as well, as all of this will be supportive. Also, have you asked council or other levels of government prior to seeking funding or approvals if your idea aligns with their own plans or strategies? Proposing a project that meets their goals gives you a huge advantage, especially when you're often seeking funding support in a competitive environment. If you haven't done this, I'd strongly encourage you to organise a time to meet with your council's recreation team. Ask them what their goals are for your facility or for sport in general in your area. You might find out that your project has already been identified in a council plan, or it might provide an opportunity to discuss updating your site master plan or to develop one if you don't have one. The next thing to consider when you're planning a facility upgrade and seeking support is your budget and the technical elements. So have you actually got a budget? Can you demonstrate that you got the money in the bank to deliver it? And then if you spend the money, you're not going to go broke. It's extremely relevant at the moment with the ongoing uncertainty and impact of COVID-19 on community sport. And what councils and government don't want to see is clubs putting up their hard-earned only to fall over because they don't have the funds to support their operations. If you do have a budget, however, will your budget cover design and construction or installation? Will it just cover design, or won't it cover anything? And do you need funding support? Have you or could you speak with local businesses or developers? Or have you contacted Leisure Networks or AFL Barwon to ask if they know of any grants available to support you? If you're seeking council funding, then obviously make contact with the appropriate officers and start the process. If this is the case, there are two things you probably need to understand. And that is, if you require significant dollars in order to deliver, you need to start conversations really early, probably a year or further out. Councils don't often have discretionary funds anymore to support community projects, and they need to go into a budget and be endorsed by council. If you're looking for council to apply for state or federal funding, as Jesse mentioned, to deliver your projects, then again, you need to commence discussions way out, as councils generally have a pipeline of projects in place. These have usually been tested with council, other key stakeholders and levels of government, well and truly before the applications are announced or opened. These projects are nearly always identified in council strategies. They're captured in master plans or regional documents like the G21 AFL Barwon strategy, and they're designed and costed or shovel ready, meaning that they're ready to be built once funding becomes available. Other things that you need to do at this stage include identifying the site for the project. If it's new construction, seeking landowner approval is critical. More often than not, the facilities and reserves that you operate on aren't owned by council, they're just managed by them. So seeking support or approval through the state government is often required. This is starting to take longer and longer, especially now that there's almost always a need to undertake a cultural heritage plan and seek approval through that department. That can take months, and with the turnaround for grant applications being quite short and then delivery sometimes being within months, you need to be well prepared and having those discussions really early. So to reiterate, if your project requires funding or approval, the standard requirements for support will likely include some form of evidence of community need and completion of a consultation process. So focus on inclusion and that provides for people of all ages and abilities when you're discussing your facilities. Try and seek letters of support from as many community groups and governing bodies as you can. Speak to your councillors, speak with AFL Barwon, your leagues and associations. I'm sure that they're going to be really happy to support you, but again, provide them some notice so they can do their research and they can provide some really strong evidence to back you up. Wherever possible, have detailed plans. And when I'm talking about plans, concept, schematic, detailed architectural drawings, which clearly articulate what you aim to deliver. Not only will this speed up the process, it demonstrates that you've thought long and hard about it, you've tested it, and that you've sought professional advice in your development. And when you're seeking support from the likes of architects and consultants, they'll nearly always be up to date with the local government requirements or what the minimum facility guidelines for AFL Barwon or Netball Victoria might be, so they can build those into the plans. The provision of supporting documentation in the form of council plans and strategies. So if you're not confident, comfortable or aware of what the documents that council have are, again, contact your recreation department, ask them for a copy or a meeting, and they can talk you through them. Most councils will have an up-to-date sport and active recreation strategy, an open space strategy. They'll likely have a master plan for your site, which will already have been tested with the community and identified the need for certain upgrades. You might find that your project is already identified in that, and that'll obviously go some way to getting an approval a lot quicker than if not. Make sure you've got a clear budget with cost estimates or quotes where possible, provided by the supplier or the installer that you're going to use. It's really critical in this step to include contingency costs for cost overruns or any unexpected issues. So if you're digging below the surface, rock and things like that, obviously have huge additional costs, and cultural heritage plans can sometimes have a cost associated with them as well. Ensure that you've got really tight timelines, build flexibility into them if you need to, but have it laid out so that the expectation can be met. As you're all aware, some projects require you to jump through hoops. Others might be a really good idea that someone come up with and we can make it happen really quickly. But the important things are to know what you want, to plan really well, gain support from like-minded people or groups. Always try to link to your council plans and strategies and those of your state government where possible, so Active Victoria and things like that. Be clear about the support that you require. What is it that you really want? Talk about your successes and the people within your club, because personalising your project goes some way to gaining support. And right now, don't be scared to ask your councillors and local members to advocate on your behalf. Relationships are critical, and we're moving into what might be an election period, so it's a good time to start having those conversations. The other thing that I'll mention with your project planning, always build ongoing maintenance costs into it, or at least consider them. One of the fundamental breakdowns of projects when they come to council is that people consider just the upfront startup costs and not how they're going to be able to service, maintain and look after those assets in future. It may be that you don't need to worry about that if you've got a agreement with council that they take on those responsibilities, but often some of those will be passed on to the particular user groups or the committees of management that have an agreement in place with council. So hopefully those quick points have been somewhat beneficial. As I said, talk to your recreation teams, make sure that you introduce yourself, continue to let them know what it is you're trying to achieve and why. It's important to talk about your successes, the people in your club, your demographics, any kind of projects or programs that you're putting in place that will lead to increased participation. At the end of the day, all the infrastructure programs that we're looking or supporting are there to increase or lead to an increase in participation or the activation of community facilities. So it's really important that you're able to tie your project back to those outcomes. And the last thing that I'll mention is with state and federal government grants, you don't really need to worry about writing those applications. Most of the time and generally, council will be the responsible party for that. And as I said earlier, they will have identified the projects that they're going to apply for sometime in advance. So get in early, talk about your project, talk about your successes, your ideas, seek support, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Brodie. Very good key points there for clubs, and I hope the clubs in the room tonight have really got some great tips from Brodie and how you can apply it in terms of council support. I'm going to pass over to Michael King, who's going to talk through the next few slides. Just make sure you're not on mute as well, Michael.
All right, all good. Bit of a tech thing. I couldn't unmute myself for some reason, but anyway, I kept pressing it and said I didn't have authorization. But so hi everyone. Fantastic presentation by Broads. Just there, a lot of detail in there. I think for everyone in the room tonight, whether it's an education session, a new build, an old build, or an established build, there's a bit of content there to take in and some good learnings, particularly around that ongoing maintenance. I thought that was a really good point to justify those costs. The next part here, just very briefly before we go to Sarah, is just around the inclusivity of planning. And we talk about the word universal design. It's just really about that buzzword around inclusion. So it's just around the design of buildings, products, or environments to make them accessible to all people, regardless of age, disability, or other factors. So we're in a world where it is all around multi-use facilities. It is all around accessibility for people with disability, aged, and youth as well, and ensuring that everything that we talk about in regards to infrastructure build is highlighted and focused on those areas. So thinking around your change rooms, your toilet amenities, your entrances, your bitumen into facilities, your rails, your steps, your lightings, ensuring that it's at the best lux that it can potentially be. So this slide really talks around ensuring when you're in your planning phase, you're talking around inclusion. When you're talking around your design, what do you want it to look for? What's the design purpose? What's the target group of your membership and your participation, to ensure that you align it with that? But also at a state and federal and local government perspective, it is important that when we talk about facilities, we talk about the holistic facility, not just what it's used for football rooms or netball rooms or whatever. How can it be used as a community purpose-built facility? How can it be a hub for other services that sit outside of your sporting club? So it's really important to think about the values of your club. What do you stand by, and what do you want to be? A welcoming and inclusive club. So that doesn't just talk about participation and language, that's about your facility as well. So it's really important that you build that into your planning phase when you're talking about infrastructure. Once you move past the build itself, it's ensuring that you use those facilities to the best of their ability, and ensure that you communicate that to your membership and your community. There's also a link here just around universal design guidelines as well, which we will share these slides with everyone after tonight. Thanks, Jess. Next. Thank you. So this is just briefly, I won't take up too much time here. About 3 or 4 years ago, Leisure Networks were involved in activating a community facility activation project. It was trialled through Vic Health with the City of Wyndham, and it's now currently live with the City of Whittlesea. That was around identifying underutilised facilities in the community, old builds, new builds, whatever, that are not being used during peak time. So think about your club right now during an off-peak time of probably 9 till 3. Who's using that facility and what's happening? So there's an opportunity potentially missed. There's an income stream missed. There's a community need missed because we're not activating them. And I'm not trying to add more work onto clubs, but when Brody was talking earlier about financing your club sustainably, long-term, if you're thinking about your build in your planning phase, think about the services that you can offer out of your build to generate an income or a participation benefit for your club. So this project was rolled out in the City of Wyndham across 4 facilities, where Leisure Networks had a staff member support the club to activate the facility during off-peak times. So between 9 and 3, getting services that sit outside of the club to come in and use the facility, use the kitchen, use the yoga, use the floor space for yoga, operate a disability service provider out of there during time, because that's their time of service. And then how can you build that into your club long term? How can you look at that facility and look at that user group and build them into your club? What's the membership option? What's the participation option? What are the longer term options for your club? So that project itself had incredible outcomes for these 4 facilities, where they at this point right now have ongoing user groups over Monday to Friday, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day using that facility, when there's no training, there's no games, there's no upgrades, there's nothing else happening at the club. So there's actually no impact to the peak times of the club at all, besides a community use, which also benefits ongoing maintenance, ongoing costs, and ongoing facility upgrades that you may think. You may be in a build that's in stage 1 now. Well, if you've got a user group in there right now, you can use that in regards to your grant bid moving forward. That project's obviously also being run in 8 facilities in Whittlesea at the moment, all at different stages, but the same thing, utilising new and old builds to activate them during off-peak times. So this is just a slide to just say, hey, there's an opportunity here when you're during your planning phase or during a new build right now, and Leisure Networks are a service that can potentially support you through resources or a step-by-step process, like the visual on the screen right now, on utilising your facility and making sure that it's an opportunity gained rather than opportunity missed. Thanks, Jess. What I would like to do now is introduce Sarah Naylor from the Geelong West Giants to talk about the new build with the football and netball club.
Beautiful, thanks, Michael, and thank you to everyone who is attending tonight. I'm just going to take you through a quick presentation of basically our journey through the redevelopment at West Oval. So this particular picture was actually taken in January. It's probably my most favourite picture to date. It's a really good just picture of what our club is going to be like, and what the Geelong West community is going to be able utilise in the future. So I'll just go to the next slide, please, Jessie. Cool. So how did this become a reality for us and for also the Geelong West Rams, who is another user group, and Geelong Cycling? So we had been in, there'd been many talks for many years in relation to a redevelopment at West Oval. I wouldn't even be able to tell you how many years back that's been happening for. But the catalyst was really becoming one club. So some of you may remember that we started off, or there were two Geelong West clubs. So Geelong West St. Peter's and Geelong West Cheetahs, different divisions in football and netball. But we were both advised it would be more likely we would get new club rooms in the future if we were to come to a mutual agreement between the clubs and work together. These discussions spanned over a couple of years. It was pretty hard for a lot of the older generation of these clubs to come to terms with saying goodbye to what they knew as either the Geelong West St. Peter's or Geelong West Cheetahs, and just having a new identity. So we decided that the best structure for us would be a joint venture, and we would rebrand both clubs as the Giants. So the build has been fully funded by the state government and City of Greater Geelong. Because the club weren't funding any of the build itself, there were many challenges, and it has probably taken a little bit longer than what it would if we were to front up with a sum of money. Many people from our club advocated for the redevelopment. We're quite lucky to have quite a few members who had strong relationships with key stakeholders, both council, state government, people who had industry experience. And without these people, we wouldn't have received the funding when we did. And it's really important to note that there was a need for this particular redevelopment at West Oval. Outside of GMHBA Stadium, there's no regional facilities in this area. And West Oval is a really good location. So we were really lucky that we are the user groups of West Oval, and that then this has come to fruition. So once notification was received that we were successful receiving the money from both state government and City of Greater Geelong, planning began. And I cannot stress this enough, collaboration is key. Building relationships with internal and external stakeholders is invaluable. Club representatives built very strong relationships with council, state government, and once the build commenced, with the builders themselves and project managers, the trades, anyone that really had anything to do with the build. All user groups were heavily involved in the planning and design process, and this really surprised me actually, because I'd never been really involved in anything like this before, and especially to this magnitude. We had a lot of say in the planning design process. It was really good. Once construction began, we've had monthly project reference group meetings with all user groups. So that's cricket, cycling, football, netball, AFL Barwon, reps from Sport and Rec Victoria, Plan Group, who are the builders, and also council. Of course, with anything that you do these days, there's always going to be challenges along the way, but everyone's been really great to deal with, and solutions or I guess issues or anything have been solved really quickly, and there haven't been any issues that we haven't been able to solve, so it's been great. And we've been encouraged to point out where improvements can be made, whether that would be changing up spaces. So one of the spaces was a gym. It was only a small area though, and we decided that we would turn it into a review room because we thought that would serve the community better than a gym would. when, you know, eventually when we do have bigger games there, it's important to have a review room, and for it to be a regional facility, that's what we thought was best. So council, plan group were really supportive of any improvements or changes that we wanted to make. And one benefit of COVID last year was it allowed plan group to have full uninterrupted access to the space, and they've really got stuck into the construction. So it's worked out really well for us as a club. Next slide, please, Jessie. So these are just some progress shots of the build. I won't go through too many of them, but you can see that second photo is the second level, as well as the photo on the bottom left-hand corner. And then the bottom right-hand corner one, I think that was done just prior to Christmas. So I look at that photo and it almost looks like the architectural drawing, but that's an actual real photo. It's just, yeah, it's amazing. There are a couple of videos down the bottom there that Plan Group did up. So when we do, I know the guys are going to send out the slides. So have a look at those. They only go for a minute or so each, but it's just a really good overview of how the facility was built as such. Next slide, please, Jessie. So what's next for us? So stage 2, the removal of the velodrome. So that is going to be, once that happens, the facility will be classified as a regional facility. So before that happens, we probably can't have too many bigger games there. I mentioned down a few points down, capacity to feature Falcons, VFLW, VFL, AFLW. The removal of the velodrome will need to happen prior to that, just for safety reasons. In stage 2, it's also earmarked for the ground to slightly move, but also be slightly bigger as well. And the ground will be raised. So that's actually pretty cool. And I just can't, just thinking about it, I can't actually imagine how they're going to raise the whole ground, but assume a lot of dirt. So we will be the largest regional facility outside of GMHBA Stadium. And we want to make sure that this isn't just for the Geelong West Giants, for the Geelong West Rams. We want it to be a community facility. We want anyone and everyone to be able to use it. And I think that's the most important thing about this whole redevelopment. It is for the community, not just for a couple of clubs who are user groups there. Interleague matches, along with cricket, soccer, rugby matches, our opportunities are endless there, both for the clubs, the user groups, and also the community. Our revenue opportunities endless. So we, as Michael was just mentioning before, we will definitely be looking at who can use the facility during the day, and when we're not using it. That's going to be key for us. Next slide, please, Jessie. I just wanted to quickly chat about what's happening around the community at the moment with new builds, and more so with Plan Group. So Plan Group have been doing quite a few builds in the community with our sporting clubs. So they did one East Geelong Football and Netball Club. That was completed in December 2019. St Mary's Sporting Club, that was completed in March 2020, and there's just a couple of pictures down here of their new facility. So I haven't actually been in it, but from all accounts, apparently it's amazing. And Herne Hill Reserve, so St Joseph's Football and Netball Club, that is due for completion in March 2021. So that's, next month, which will be great for them. There's also just a little video that Plan Group put together in relation to that build as well. So I was having a look at that today, and that's actually really cool to see. So again, you'll be able to have a look at that when the slides or the presentation is sent through to you. And I think that's about it from me.
Sarah, just back to me quickly. I'll just ask a question on behalf probably of everyone listening. When we talk about infrastructure and we talk about multiple user groups, collaboration seems to be king a lot of the time, but collaboration can cause time complications and can cause a bit of angst in regards to relationships of who has priority of what. And sometimes people believe footy and netball try and take that priority in regards to multiple user groups in one site. How has your club navigated conflict resolution or conflict management to ensure that everyone has a piece of the pie, everyone's voice is heard, and the benefit is dual across all codes that share that facility? Because I'm thinking of people listening right now saying, geez, it's great to have multi-use, geez, it's great to have other user groups using our facility during the day, but where does it stop, and how do we ensure we're volunteers? How do we ensure there's almost policy or education there to ensure that we're all there for the right reason and we're all there for the best outcome of the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at the moment we're working through, because the Geelong West Rams, they're a user group as well. So we're working through how everything's going to look with football and netball and cricket as well. So at the moment we have 6 months of the year. So whoever has that 6 months has priority use. So we'll be it'll just be lots of meetings and just catching up and getting together and working out what suits everyone. And I think it's really important that you have to be open going into those sort of meetings, because you really need to be mindful of what other user groups want as well. You can't just take everything. And you're right, a lot of people do think football and netball clubs just, want to take everything and leave nothing to anyone else. But it's going to be really important for us, not just with the cricket club, but any other user groups as well. We need to just be mindful, I think, of when other people want to use it, what they want to use it for, and just be open and flexible. Being flexible is also going to be really important for us.
And then on that secondary, once the build is there, has there been any thought or discussion around, you're saying it's going to be a regional facility, the biggest one in Geelong, and it's going to get a lot of heat. How does the club manage that in regards to inquiries and ensuring, thinking about utility bills, different user groups coming in, things like that? Has the club put some thought behind some process to get ahead of the game a bit, a bit more, proactive rather than responsive to that?
Yeah, so utility, well, just with the size of the building, utility bills, everything is going to increase dramatically for us before we even become that regional facility as such. But yeah, we've definitely thought about how we are going to handle that. We're going to have someone manage, all those bookings. But even just having a good relationship with like the likes of Falcons, AFL Barwon, AFLW, VFL, whoever, cricket, anyone, just having good, strong relationships with the likes of those. But revenue-wise and paying for utility bills and everything, it's going to be really holding like canteens, having the bar open, having functions there, all those sorts of things that we think are going to cover anything like that. So I think what we're going to be able to do with the space and invite others in to use that space, that's how we're going to sort of cover those the costs of increasing utilities.
Yeah, beautiful. And just one final thing, just sort of seeing a few little comments in the chat, but Brodie, for you, any sort of thoughts or final comments for you around the discussion that Sarah's just talked about, like from the planning and the preparation through to the execution of it? Is there any advice from you in regards to, because I know being a past council employee myself, there's a lot of, you don't hear all the great news, but you hear the difficult situations. Is there any advice or processes that you believe clubs should initiate to save the pain later on in regards to the build and then that relationship side of things?
Yeah, Michael, look, I think it's critical that you utilise the support the council offers in facilitating conversations with other user groups and community members, knowing early what their expectations or needs are going to be so that you can plan well for it. And although it might sound a bit bureaucratic, I think having memorandums of understanding and clear agreements with other users is critical so that the expectation is set, the responsibilities are clear, and then if there's any, I suppose, confusion or issues arise, you can go back to that document and clearly go through it and have some discussions. It's a way of the future. So all councils are dealing with undersupply and oversupply issues. We have a number of traditional sports clubs generally used by football, netball, cricket that lay dormant during the week and between 9 and 5 that we need to activate. Whilst on weekends and after hours, scheduling issues become a real issue with, the increased participation numbers. So it's a balancing act, and I think it's something that all levels of government and community need to start working together on and to address. But yeah, my advice would be have conversations early, be really clear with the expectations and responsibilities, and utilise a facilitator where you can, whether that's council or AFL Barwon or Leisure Networks or somebody else that can offer that support.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brodie. Thanks, Sarah. Michael, I'll hand over to you to finish up.
Thanks, mate. Sorry, I just had to unmute so that I was able to speak. So thanks very much, guys, for your presentation. Just like to thank Jesse and Michael and from Leisure Networks and the guest speakers, Brodie and Sarah, for taking the time to present. Some great insight, I think you'll agree, was provided to enhance the club operations and what support and funding is available. How you can access these opportunities. I think there was a wealth of knowledge there. Sarah's presentation also demonstrated what can be achieved by some foresight, lateral thinking and inter-club cooperation, which doesn't always come easy. And I think it's worth acknowledging and noting that it can be done. Leisure Networks are a great resource to tap into. If required, avail yourself of their service because they certainly have obviously a wealth of knowledge and a lot to offer. Thanks everyone for attending the session. All resources and recorded session will be available on the AFL Barwon website at the conclusion of Educational Week. Not too late to register for other amazing sessions this week. Tomorrow night we've got Tariq Bayrakli, screen went dead, from Club Respect presenting on making positive impacts at your club. And then Rana Hussain presenting on how to become a more inclusive club. Head to our website for the full schedule and the link to register. If you're not already registered for the next session, I'm sure you can link in. Thanks very much for your attendance.